Hey everyone, this is Louis7, and in this video I want to talk about the mission system that is coming with the War of the Three Peaks mini expansion in Update 28 in the Lord of the Rings Online, and more specifically I just want to give an early review of the system as it is in beta, and I will kind of be focusing on improvements the system could use before the patch goes live. But to section things off, I'll start with some background information on the system, then talk about things I like about the mission system as it is now in the beta. Then the main chunk of the video will be on the improvements the system could use again. To begin the system overview, the missions themselves are short quest-like content that are repeatable dailies. They are started from a control room where there are a bunch of dwarves and they are instanced and can be run solo or duo. Additionally, a big draw from them is that they scale from level 20 to 130, so they're very inclusive of many different character levels. From the missions, you get a small reward at the end of each one and have a daily quest to complete 3 missions, which that gives a small reward, and a weekly quest to complete the daily quest 4 times, which gives a slightly larger than small reward. But you are introduced to the mission system from an auto-bestow quest, which eventually takes you to the war room, and that gets you started on an introductory mission. After that, there are about 8 missions that you can choose from, and from the beta this was a little bit inconsistent, I will say, but every day these 8 missions will change, and there are a total of 80 missions which this can be pulled from, and there is a meta deed to complete all 80 missions. But yeah, it looks like there will be 8 a day and kind of changing every day what they are. Anyway, the missions themselves, the actual content in them, they're fairly easy and pretty quick to complete. And while they do vary, most of them are very simple actually, and roughly the same amount of content as a regular quest. So some are as simple as just kill 10 enemies or kill this boss signature really quick or pick up 6 items, those type of things. But there are some that are a little bit more involved than that. On top of that, they are also not difficult to complete. Enemies in them are fairly easy to just mow through, at least for the most part, and you're probably seeing that in the background gameplay. But there are some crazy inconsistencies and weird mechanics. I don't know if they're bugs or not, but I do just want to inform you all of that. Basically a couple missions I've run where mobs do crazy damage and basically one-shot me. And then sometimes signatures would randomly have 3 to 4 times their normal health, basically the same amount of health as a regular boss you would see. So I did just want to point that out so everyone is aware, and I'm not sure if these inconsistencies are intended just to have a little bit of variety and potentially extra difficulty in a couple specific missions, but it did, at least for me in my experience, make the missions, some of them in particular, feel a bit off, I guess is the best way to put that. That background information on the mission system, I now want to talk about all the good things with the system, which there is actually a lot here, because I actually really do like the idea of the missions. So first off, I love that they are inclusive of different level players. It's a good thing for low levels to be able to run these. It just allows people who aren't all the way caught up to level 130 to experience the new content and experience the War of the Three Peaks experience, going to the Gates of Gundabad and all the stuff involved with that with the dwarves. The only unfortunate thing is that you have to be level 130 to the Legacy of Durn and the Trials of Dwarves, the book quest involved, kind of around this time, so that's just the only thing I wanted to point out there. But the other thing, the second thing I like, is they are repeatable and there's a large variety, so that kind of plays to the idea of the system should be very easy to repeat. It has a lot of replayability is more what I'm thinking, so you can just keep on running it over and over and hopefully not get burnout or anything like that. But kind of the draw of the mission system, I think, is that it just offers a lot of replayability. And third off here, I like that the daily and weekly quests promote you to repeat this. You don't have to do a ton of missions. I think it's 3 missions for the daily quest, and the weekly quest is just completing the daily quest 4 times. So if you just want the reward from those, you don't have to do it much. But it really promotes you to repeat this and keep playing through it again with the whole replayability thing. That's definitely a big aspect of what I like about it. And then the fourth thing I like here is I do like how accessible they are. So not just player level, but it's easy to transport to the war room. You just go to one of those stable masters that specifically take you, one of the dwarves that teleport you to the war room. And it's kind of the same thing that Midsummer, the Great Wedding did. So in that, you talk to a stable master and just went to Midsummer, that version of Minas Tirith, and you could run through the book quest, and you can still do that. So having that easily accessible for a lot of players and any level 20 player and above, it's super easy to get there, which is a good thing, just accessible for a lot more people so more people can participate in it. Definitely a good thing that I like. Moving on, the fifth thing I like is the cosmetic rewards. Now, there will be a lot of negative I have about the rewards with the mission system, but from what there is, the actual cosmetics there are, I really, really like the cosmetic weapons, so that's something very much for at least me to look forward to. Moving on, the sixth thing I like is the variety within the missions themselves. So, as I talked about earlier, what you actually do in the missions is pretty standard, like quest-like stuff. You pick up items, kill mobs, but within the missions, they take you to a ton of different places and just have a lot of different things going on. There are dragons, random like beasts, thinking like battle cats. There are a lot of goblins, orcs, just a bunch of different things. A lot of variety in the mobs you kill. There's even those tree-like mobs that I can't think of the name of right now, but there's also just so many different areas you go. You're in a lot of different, have caves, you have actual dwarven structures like at the gates of Gundabad, I assume, or in the Gundabad area. You go to a bunch of different zones around the region, so like northern Mirkwood, you even go there. In places around there I've seen, you go to Arid Mithra in the Grey Mountains, there's a lot of stuff around there. There's also the Vales of Anduin that you go to, and then the zone above that, the Wells of Langflood. So just a lot of variety. You're not doing the same stuff over and over. It's not like you're at the gates of Gundabad with every single mission. That would probably get a little bit tiring. So just having a lot of that variety within the missions, I think, is a good thing, or between the different missions, rather. Anyway, we can go ahead and move on from that to the seventh thing I like, which is that the mobs actually drop level appropriate loot. And now I do want to point out this is regular mob loot, and the rewards again will be a big focus of the improvement section, but it is nice that they at least drop normal mob loot. There's no like in-game or level appropriate like gear that drops. It's just whatever a regular mob has a chance of dropping, but just that they do drop the loot I like. Anyway, we can move on from that to the eighth thing I like, which is missions are a super easy alternative for XP other than like skirmishes, which I think skirmishes are fun, but they do take a little bit longer and tiring after a time because it's just the same thing over and over. And I think this is just has the potential at least to be more entertaining with a lot more variety. And also this is true for comparing it to farming instances, also known as warg pins, for hours and hours. I just think it's has the potential to be a better alternative, and so far from what I've played in the beta, it's a super easy alternative for XP. Again, other than if you're going solo, other than like skirmishes. So I think that's a good thing, just to have an alternative way to level, especially with LOTRO. It has so many levels, so anything to help with XP is a good thing. And I'll talk a lot again about character progression and the rewards later, but as far as XP goes, it's definitely a thing I like. But for the last thing here, the last point I have here is I like the story of what is going on and how the War of the Three Peaks is being handled with the mission system. Again, it is good that it is inclusive of all level players with this. That is something I've already talked about, but as far as the actual story with the dwarves going to the gates of Gundabad, the War of the Three Peaks going towards Gundabad, I'm at least personally finding this interesting, so it is a point I wanted to include at the end here. So that was it for the quick, or at least somewhat quick, overview of the things I like about the mission system, which there is quite a lot there. It really has, based on all of that, the potential to be a great system. But now I do want to get into the bulk of this video, which I will talk about why I think the missions need improvement before the update goes live. And the very first thing I just have to bring up is that the missions are a big selling point for the mini expansion. They appear to be what is supposed to separate it from a regular quest pack that would be like included for VIP players or available from the LOTRO store for your LOTRO points that you already have like right off the bat. Anyway, the missions need to be a good system that is fully fleshed out and is rewarding to players to participate in for the War of the Three Peaks mini expansion to be worth that price tag, at least to me, versus being called a quest pack. So while the missions could use improvement, before I get into the specific details with that, I do want to quickly point out that during the beta, there have already been some improvements to the system since the first beta build, so we can continue to hope that feedback like this is accounted for before the update goes live. That would be really nice. Anyway, I'll just go through a list here, but I do want to say that a lot of this is going to have to do with the rewards, because the structure of like any system in the game is the actual content. You have the story relation and the rewards. Those are at least the three big parts I was thinking. And I've already talked a lot about the story aspect from the missions, and I've talked about some of the actual content and the structure of the system. And for this, I think we can go ahead and start off. I will say it did feel a bit odd that there was only a single introductory quest and that was it. You were kind of left on your own with just a few missions unlocked and not sure where to go from there, besides actually running the missions. And obviously this isn't a huge deal, but I did just want to point out that it was an odd feeling thing like when I was progressing through it. And basically if there are follow-up quests to complete, like the 8 or whatever missions you have unlocked to start, I don't know how they would do that because it changes daily, but some sort of wrapper quest basically that gives you like a little bit more motivation to go through them all from the start. I think the system would be better with that at least. And I do want to point out, I checked my level 130 character and he actually got a quest like this to complete a set of specific missions. Now these missions weren't always available, so I'd have to wait every day for that specific quest to see if they were available, and it was actually a repeatable quest. We'll get to that, I think, a little bit later in the rewards from it. But yeah, that was just a little bit odd that there was a follow-up for the level 130, but then all the lower level characters, there was no follow-up. A little bit inconsistency there in the follow-up specifically for the level 130. It was a bit odd because it was to complete specific missions when those missions weren't necessarily available for you right away. Anyway, to move on, the second point I want to talk about here is the rewards. And the first thing here is the chest at the end of the missions only for level 130. So it was really disappointing to me that my level 130 got a chest. That part wasn't disappointing, but it was disappointing that any of my lower level characters, 129 and below, they didn't get a chest at the end of the mission. And to me, this seems like, I've talked about it a lot in the previous videos, it seems like it's some like unintentional bug, but I'm actually not sure if that's the case because I got to thinking about it a little bit more. And I do want to point out, it is possible that just for level cap characters, because they don't get XP, like the normal leveling XP, I mean, you do get legendary item XP. But anyway, the regular XP, that is something that level cap characters, they actually have to deal with it with regular quests anyway, and that's kind of thinking more about it. It wouldn't seem like they have a chest there just for level 130s because they don't get XP, because that's something any level cap character has to deal with when running through basically anything, any instance, any skirmish, any mission, any quest or anything. You just don't get XP. It's a regular thing. The kind of point here is that was really odd that the chest at the end of the mission, while it's a nice thing and I think it could have more in it, we'll get to some more specific rewards later that could be put in it, but I think that should be gotten, or at least available for people that do it below level 130 to get as well. Moving on though, the reward from each mission quest is 2 Gabalaka war marks, and these are used for cosmetic only and are character bound. First off, because the missions themselves, they scale from level 20 to 130, I feel like the system would be a lot better if everything you got, so the Gabalaka war marks specifically, if they were account bound. Now these are used for cosmetics, so it wouldn't be too bad of a thing if they were account bound, because you could get them, you could run through a bunch of vaults and then you could just get the cosmetics a little bit easier, and feel like maybe if you have a level 130 character going through this and then you decide to do it on one of your low level characters to level them a bit, you won't be stuck with just a few Gabalaka war marks on your low level character. You can actually use them on any character you use. So I think having those account bound would be an improvement. And just to point out that the reward from each mission is the Gabalaka war marks, they can only be bartered for cosmetics. So that's something we'll get to later, but I did just want to highlight that it is a big thing. I feel like either having another thing that isn't for cosmetics, and we'll get to actually the Gundabad copper coins, but having something more than just cosmetics would be good from that, I think. Anyway, to move on, the reward from the daily is 9 copper coins of Gundabad, and those are used only for level 130. And then the quest also gives 20 motes of enchantment, which is hardly any, but you can eventually, after doing that a ton of times, eventually barter for like 1 piece of gear that scales from level, I think, 20 to 120, somewhere around there, maybe 20 to 121. I'm not entirely sure the exact end level for that, but it's something around that. And the point is that the daily quest, it does give you 9 copper coins of Gundabad. That's like the big bulk of it, but those are only used at level 130, so it's a little bit odd if you're running through this at like level 20. You get 9 copper coins of Gundabad, which is actually quite a decent amount, relatively decent amount. You can only use it at level 130. You can't get any like scalable pieces of gear, which would be a great thing to reward some of the lower level players. You only can use them at level 130. And again, these are going to be character bound Gundabad copper coins, so you can't like do this on a low level character and then have some of the Gundabad copper coins to barter for with your level 130 character if you're running like through this with a level cap character and running through on some of your alts. You can't use the currency you get on your low level characters on your level cap character. And that to me is another thing that just having it account bound rather than character bound could definitely be a good thing. Or offering some different things for the Gundabad copper coins, like having some stuff below level 130 for that, like some sort of scalable gear, kind of like Motes of Enchantment, how they offer. Having that would be a good thing, I think. Anyway, to get moving on for the reward from the weekly, that gives 30 copper coins of Gundabad and 200 Motes of Enchantment. And that is a little bit more of each of those. You can only run it once a week, so even with the 200 Motes of Enchantment, that's 10 times as many as you get from the daily one. But it's not that much. You have to run through this a ton of times to be able to get like one single box of gear for your character. And also with the weekly quest to get moving on, there's 3 max tier Scrolls of Empowerment and a max tier Starlit Crystal. You have to actually choose from one of those. So that one is a bit odd because having the newest content, level 130 content, I could go on a whole side thing with this. I'll try to avoid that. But having the new level 130 content give you max tier Scrolls of Empowerment and max tier Starlit Crystals is a very odd thing, because that means like when you're that high level, you probably want to already have your legendary item past the point of these max tier Scrolls of Empowerment, max tier Starlit Crystals. I will say the idea of these is definitely good for a catch-up mechanic if they gave you a lot of them, so you could quickly get caught up to like level 130, assuming you're a level 130 character, because this weekly is available for players below level 130. I do just want to point that out, that some of the like a level 20 could be getting these max tier Scrolls of Empowerment and max tier Starlit Crystals, which are only for imbued items and only for level 100 plus basically. But you can bank those up if you don't have like a higher level character. If you're just randomly going through, maybe your highest level character is like 30, 40, 50, just anything below 100, and you wanted to check this out, you'd be getting rewards that you can't use to level 100 plus. But anyway, back to what I was going on about. It's just a little bit odd that what they give you, it's not bad that they give you some LI items and things to boost that, but they give you so little. You can choose a max tier Starlit Crystal to help like a little bit, or 3 Scrolls of Empowerment from the weekly quest, so you have to do that. You only get those once a week basically if you run this every week, and that's just not too much, and especially it being the max tier is a little bit odd, even though it's a good thing for a catch-up mechanic. If they want it to be a catch-up mechanic, I think they should give a lot more, and maybe even give something like that many for the daily quest, just to be a catch-up mechanic again with the max tier specifically, highlighting that it's a max tier Scroll of Empowerment. Otherwise, I think it could just be a regular Amphalos Scroll of Empowerment and regular Amphalos Starlit Crystal. Anyway, moving on from that, there is also a daily and weekly quest for level 130 characters only. On top of that, as I mentioned, that level 130s, there is a repeatable wrapper style quest to just complete a few specific missions. And all of these reward a few Gundabad copper coins. It's actually honestly not that much. You get more Gundabad copper coins from the ones that even characters below level 130 can do, which is odd because the Gundabad copper coins are the new level 130 currency in the zone Elder Slade. Anyway, they also do give a couple Gabalaka War Marks, and it's really just a little bit extra for level 130 players. As I talked about earlier, there's a chest at the end, and I said potentially they have that chest only for level 130 to make up for level 130 characters only getting XP, or not getting any character XP rather. But this also basically makes up for that, a little bit extra reward for level 130 characters going through this. Anyway, we can get moving on from that. So those are the actual rewards you get from the missions, and the third thing I actually want to talk about is also rewards, and this will, just to point out, be the last thing I have to talk about, but going into a lot more detail here. And I do just want to say that the rewards are an important thing to motivate players to go through them, and especially like replay the missions as time goes on. So it's just a big thing when talking about missions for players to decide if they want to purchase the War of the Three Peaks. But for the actual rewards you get, like the stuff to barter for, there are cosmetics, and that is it with the Gabalaka War Marks at least. So cosmetics of course are nice, and as I mentioned, I like these cosmetics personally. but you don't get anything that is actually impactful to your character progression from the missions. It's kind of what I've been, I think, hinting at towards this whole section here. And with the rewards, there's just a lot that I think it feels like there's missing, again, with actual character progression. I've said this many times already, but I feel like Virtue XP would fit perfectly into the system because characters of all levels can enjoy Virtue XP, and it's just like the absolute perfect thing to put in there. And as far as like a realistic suggestion that is super simple, you can maybe get like 10 or 20 Virtue XP for each mission, and that would keep it super minimal, even though with 10 or 20 Virtue XP for each mission, if you ran 100 missions at 10 Virtue XP for each one, that would only be 1,000 Virtue XP. That is not that much Virtue XP. So at that little Virtue XP, it'd actually be very minor, just a very, very minor thing to help. So for me, I personally think 30 to 50 Virtue XP would be a good number. But with that means that there'd be like 20 to 35 missions you have to run to get roughly 1,000 Virtue XP instead of the 100 that I just mentioned. But having, I think after roughly the 20 to 35 missions or so, to get that, I think that would be a lot more of a reward, a lot more meaningful reward. And just to point out, 20 missions is a lot of content, and it's actually a somewhat major investment for you for just 1,000 Virtue XP, so it's not really like an insane amount. And really linking back to what I said earlier, just having Virtue XP as this would be a perfect thing because, again, it's not an insane amount. You could do deeds to get more Virtue XP, it'd be more worth your time, but just a little bit extra of a thing to make it actually worth your investment into this, I think would be Virtue XP, and again, inclusive of all character levels, just like the mission system is. But anyway, I'm rambling about that. At this point, the other thing I feel like is missing from missions is gear. So maybe not every mission needs to give a piece of gear, but maybe the daily could give you a gear box, or as I mentioned, the end of mission chest that could have a chance for gear, a small chance for gear, just to have it actually like that little bit of RNG reward that players love that you could get from the end of each mission as a possibility, kind of like instances. But I think that way, if you use missions to level your character, no matter what level they are, if it's like a scalable piece of gear, a gearbox, that's what I mean by a gearbox, kind of like the ones you can barter for motes of enchantment, I think that means no matter the level of your character, you at least get some improvements along the way with gear. And I will point out that the motes of enchantment actually do play a little bit towards this, but from my beta experience, at least, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think there's enough of those to really help you gear your character if you use missions as like an alternative to level, which, as we mentioned earlier, that is actually a great thing from the missions, that it can be a good alternative to level for at least a little bit. And kind of, to be honest here, there are actually a ton of more suggestions I have for how these missions could be more rewarding. So I'll keep this a little bit short and just list a few things off here. So there could be Virtue XP and gear, as we just discussed, but there could also be maybe more LI boosting things, such as some scrolls of empowerment as like a rare drop from into mission chest, or even max tier as a reward from the daily quest. And that won't even be too insane. As I talked about earlier, the max tier is a little bit odd because at the level 130 content, or at least the one from the weekly quest, that it's max tier, it seems like it could be kind of playing towards a catch-up mechanic, but you don't really get enough of those for it to be a catch-up mechanic. So this could be a good thing for that, even though, again, this would be a little bit odd because anybody below level 100 basically couldn't utilize these. But moving on, they could also have some meta deeds for like clash trait points. I know big issue with that, but for anyone unfamiliar with that system, I'll just refer you to the video I made on the clash trait points and all the issues with that system. But the point here for this is that it could help make missions more rewarding of all character level players. Maybe after running through all 80 missions, you could just get a clash trait point, with at least the way they have that system now. Again, I'll leave the other stuff for the video. But anyway, they could even have like level appropriate crafting mats within the missions. So this is something that would be a little bit odd, but it'd just be one other thing that could make it a little bit more rewarding if they don't go with these other options. I'm basically just presenting a bunch of different options with how these could be more rewarding, and that is really all I can think of right now. And again, the point here is there are just a ton of different things they could add to missions to make it feel like it is more worth repeating for things other than just a quick XP farm for low level characters, which, by the way, just to point out in LOTRO, you are very heavily encouraged to level by the book quest and do a whole bunch of like deeds for virtue XP while you level. In the book quest, that part is especially true after level 85, or your character will become relatively super weak, which is unfortunate, so that's why you're encouraged to level that way. But anyway, that is all I had for these suggestions, and I think it is good to keep the perspective that rewards don't need to be insane for each individual mission you run, but I just think at this point the system doesn't really have enough to promote players to run it, and it doesn't really reward them for going through and investing their time into the mission system. And I will say the only thing it seems like the mission system is really useful for is getting cosmetics on whatever character you decide to go through it on, because the Goblocka war marks aren't account bound, but they're also useful for getting XP, and that's pretty much it. You do get a little bit of Gundabad copper coins for your level cap character, but it's really not. The daily amount has a decent amount, the daily quest has a decent amount rather, but it's just not really a consistent way to get some baseline gear just from running through the missions. And with all that, as I have talked about like ad nauseum now, I think there should just be more, and I'll leave it at that for this video. That is definitely enough talking about the rewards with the missions. I feel super randomly right now. But with that, I have now talked about everything with the missions actually and what I think could be improved. To quickly give a summary on my thoughts, I think the missions have the potential to be a great system, and there are many things I like about the missions as we talked about, but I don't feel like you are rewarded for your time invested in them. They do provide good XP and an easy thing for low level characters to do. There just isn't much to motivate us players to run through them, and I think this is very significant when you consider if you want to purchase the War of the Three Peaks mini expansion. While there are other things with the zone and the update that you would get, a big selling point is the missions. Right now, at least what we have in the beta, I think this is something that many players will just like quickly go through, and they feel like they just aren't worth running anymore. At least that's what I feel like right now. So that's really all I have for this video. I really hope it helps you learn about the mission system and maybe helps you decide if they are actually a worthy piece in the mini expansion. But if you did enjoy this or learn something useful, please consider liking and subscribing for more, or becoming a channel member to support the content, and thanks for watching everyone.